Hi, good evening. Welcome back to Texas Beach Mom or Mama Robin. If you've been here before, and if you're new, welcome. Um, I've had a thought since I mostly talk about crime, or I mostly talk about the Watts case, but I do also talk about true crime in general. I kind of wanted to add some stuff, not just Chris Watts, but I kind of wanted to add some stuff. So, what I've thought about doing is taking each state and picking a story from each state. And it either needs to be an unsolved mystery or it needs to be a crime where they had a trial and there's a verdict. But I feel the verdict is wrong. Like if they are found not guilty, but I think they're guilty, or if they were found guilty and I think they should be free. So that's kind of what I want to work on. I don't know how everybody's going to react to it, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one tonight. Give your opinions on the case. Give your opinions on whether or not you like this. Like I said before in other videos, I kind of like it. I want people to give their opinions. I want to make this like a discussion as much as I can without going live because I can't do that yet. I need a few more people before I can start going live. But anyway, so I'm going to pick one tonight because it's been on my brain a lot anyway. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Texas because this takes place in Texas. And it's Wylie, Texas, which is up by Dallas. I think it's northeast of Dallas. It's part of the Dallas suburbs. But either way, Wylie, Texas. So the date is... My brain died right as soon as I was getting ready to say it. The date is June 13th, Friday, June 13th, 1980, Wylie, Texas. And Alan and Betty Gore are asleep in bed. And they're, woke up by their baby crying. So she gets up to take care of the baby. And as she's getting up to take care of the baby, he goes makes himself some breakfast. He's getting ready to go to work. She's going to stay home with the kids. They've got two children, two daughters. The oldest is around 5 or 6. The baby's around 1, maybe 1.5. So she gets up to take care of the baby. He makes breakfast. Well, while he's getting dressed for work, she's talking to him. She's very upset with her situations as they are. He goes out of town a lot for work. I personally think and I'm not a therapist, I don't claim to be, just from what I know of the story, of her history, her background, I think she was basically depressed, like clinically depressed, and I think she suffered from postpartum depression at this time, in my opinion. No medical background. But anyway, based on how the thing she comes off. But anyway, so she's upset because he spends a lot of time at work. And he travels a lot for work. Like, he's out of town a lot for work. And he's talking to him about leaving again. And it's really bothering her. And it's getting on her nerves. It's weighing heavy on her. That she doesn't want him to leave anymore. And he's like, I got to. It's part of my job. It's like, you don't understand. You're not hardly ever here. I'm responsible for the house, the kids, this and that, the other. You're never here to lean on. And when you are here, you're not much help. And he basically politely tells her to get her act together, which kind of pissed me off. So I was like, maybe you should get your act together. But I digress because it's not my life. It's hers. Anyway, she's talking to him about leaving all the time, and she's upset, and he was like, look, why don't I get back in town? Why don't we take some sort of little vacation or something? Well, this will get better. He said, their other daughter was spending the night at a friend's house. He said, she'll be home soon. I'll be home. He said, I won't be home this weekend. I'm going straight from work to the bank and then from the bank to the airport. He says, so when I leave, I went back for a couple days, but it'll get better. It'll get better. You just wait and see. Well, then she drops a bombshell. She says, I think I'm pregnant. And this baby's only like 18 months old. And he's like, I don't think you're pregnant. She says, I think I'm pregnant. And he says, I don't think you're pregnant. Well, anyway, he talks to her a little bit more, and he cheers her up a little bit, and he leaves. Well, her other daughter is, like I said, 5 or 6, and she's spending the night at a friend's house. And what it is there's these two families. What we got here is we got Candace Montgomery and her husband Pat and their 2 children, a boy and a girl. And then we got Betty and Alan Gore and their 2 kids, and they're both little girls. And Candace Montgomery's daughter and Betty Gore's daughter are around the same age, and they play together a lot. Betty Gore's daughter does a lot of sleepovers over there. So anyway, Candace Montgomery is Betty's best friend, or at least self-proclaimed Betty's best friend. And she calls Betty to say, hey, husband's left for work, and she's going about her morning, and she's taking care of the baby, and everything's going on. Candy Montgomery calls and says, hey, your daughter wants to spend the night again tonight, so instead of bringing her home, can we keep her for another night? They're really playing, they're getting along, she wants to stay in. Betty's like, fine. Whatever, that's fine. She said, but she's got a swim lesson today, so you'll have to have her suit, and you'll have to pick up some peppermints, because every time she goes underwater, I give her a peppermint. Candy says, that's fine. What would be a good time for me to swing by? And Betty goes, around noon. Candy says, I'll see you later. So they get off the phone. And some things I forgot to mention. And, I didn't really write this out good. I didn't actually write this out at all. This is just memory. But this is a small town in Texas, late 70s, early 80s, because it's actually 1980. So you're coming out of the 70s. It's a small town in Texas up by Dallas. And 2 things are really popular in Texas, consistently: God and football. And both families were big in the church, but especially Candy Montgomery. She does choir, plays volleyball. She helps the kids do plays. She's really big into church. I know the lighting's really rough in here. I've got a really bad migraine. But I wanted to do this. So I digress. I'm back. We're back. Anyway, so Candy Montgomery's talking to Betty about, coming over and getting the swimsuit and stuff. And like I said, she says, what time do you want me to come over? And Candy's like, what's her face is like, well, I am distracted. This headache did it. But no, I'm gonna push through. Betty Gore's like, no, noon's fine. So she gets off the phone and she calls her husband, because something about that stressed her out. So she calls her husband, and he's too busy, can't talk to her. So she gets frustrated. She turns the ringer down, and she continues with her morning chores. So she told Candy about noon would be good. Candy, of course, shows up at 10 a.m. Betty opens the door and realizes it's Candy standing there. And she goes, well, I wasn't expecting you to about noon. And Candy goes, yeah, I know. You wouldn't mind. I'm busy. She just kind of shoves by Betty and she's rattling. She's talking 100 miles an hour. And Betty's kind of looking at her like, bitch, I told you noon. She doesn't say that, obviously, but that's her. You can read her face. It's like, I told you noon. But she doesn't say anything, and Candy's being her cheerful, bubbly self, and she's pushing through the house, and she's just walking around the house like it's her house, and she overhears dogs, and she realizes they got new dogs, so she goes out back, and she sees the dogs, and just as soon as Betty says, don't pick up the dogs, Candy's picking up the dogs, and loving on them, and hugging them, and putting them back down, not listening to a thing Betty says. So they get back into the house, and they're getting the swimsuit and stuff. So she goes to get swimsuit and peppermint. And then next thing you know, Candy's leaving. And she looks a little out of sorts, like they'd had a disagreement. She's a little out of sorts. She's a little out of sorts. Like she's leaving. Like something like had a disagreement. But she leaves and she goes on with the rest of her day. She picks the kids up from Bible school. She takes the little ones, the Betty's daughter, to swim lessons. She gives her peppermints. They go to the movies later. Whole day. She goes through the day like nothing big's happened. Well, meanwhile, Betty's husband has gotten off work. And he tries to call Betty back because he tried once and didn't get a hold of her because she turned the ringer down. She was mad at him because she couldn't reach him when she wanted to. So he calls her back after work and she doesn't reach her. So he thinks, well, she's still mad. So he goes ahead and he goes to the bank. And then he goes to the airport. And while he's at the airport, he uses the payphone and he tries her again. Can't get a hold of her. It's like, is she really mad? Can she really be this mad? Whatever. So he does his flight. He gets to where he's going. He gets to the hotel and calls again. Still can't get a hold of her. It's like something's wrong. Something's not right. So he keeps trying to get a hold of his wife, Betty. Can't get a hold of her. Can't get a hold of her. Can't get a hold of her. So every so often he keeps trying to call her from the hotel room phone or from payphone out in the lobby or wherever. Because he's got things, he's there for work. He's got things he's trying to get done, but he's also trying to get a hold of his wife. Well, finally, about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, he starts getting stressed out. He's like, where is my wife? Why can't I reach my wife? So he sends a neighbor over. He says, why don't you go over there, do me a favor, and go check on Betty? And the guy's like, dude, it's like 10:30 at night. He goes, I know, but I haven't been able to get a hold of her all day. She's been really depressed lately. Could you please at least just go check on her? The guy goes, he doesn't really check on her. He kind of looks around. He sees lights on in the house. He sees her car in the garage. He goes back, he tells Alan, he says, she's home. Her lights are on. Car's in the garage, fine. So Alan calls back a couple more times, still doesn't get her. Well, he's starting to get upset. He's getting panicked. So it seems. Anyhow, he keeps calling. Well, finally, about an hour later, he's like, look, I need you to go back over there, and I need you to really knock on the door, get her to answer the door, and talk to her, make sure she's okay. Well, he doesn't just tell this friend. He calls a couple more friends in the neighborhood to send them over. So these three guys all meet up, and they're like, they kind of look at each other like, what are you doing here? You know, they're all three kind of talking like, what are you doing here? And they're all like, Alan called us and told us to come check on Betty. Okay. So they check the backyard, and the dogs are still out back, which is a little odd because it's late at night and they're good about bringing their dogs in at night. Dogs are out back and they're like, okay, that's a little weird. But Betty's car's in the garage and the lights are on. They go to knock on the door and they realize the door's unlocked. So they very carefully kind of open the door and they peer their head in and they kind of look around and they go, Betty? You know, they're hollering for Betty. Can't get her to answer. They hear the baby crying. So they go in very slowly and carefully. One of them goes back to check on the baby and he sees this baby in her crib and she just screams so much she's just about hoarse. So they can't figure out what's going on. Well, the other two are looking around the house. They find her. And they call Alan. And they tell Alan, we found her. She's been shot. Shot? Well, he starts crying. And he calls Candy, Betty's best friend. And he says, Betty's been shot. Candy's like, shot? What do you mean shot? Like, shot with a gun. You know, bang, she's dead. Candy's very upset at this point. She looks very confused, but she's very upset. So, of course, word starts spreading around the neighborhood that a maniac broke into the house and killed Betty Gord. Everybody's very upset. So, he comes home from his work trip, and the police, of course, question him, and he's got a rock solid alibi. He even provides bank statements and everything else. He's got a rock solid alibi. He was out of town. Betty, turns out Betty didn't get shot. Police informing me she wasn't shot. She was killed with an axe. Well, that's more fear. Because, shot is one thing. It might have been a robbery gone wrong, even though there was nothing missing. But to be attacked with an axe? Good Lord. So there's this little town of Wiley, little suburb Wiley is just up in arms, and this is a church community, and everybody kind of knows everybody. They're like, Betty Gore was killed with an axe. Good Lord, what's going on around here? So they find out that Betty's been killed with an axe. And they find out that they start questioning the husband. They're really talking to him. Well, after the first couple of interviews, they interview him a couple of times. Because even though he had an alibi, there's something missing. There's something not quite right. So, they get to talking to him, and they finally tell him, look, you're hiding something. We're not sure what it is. Well, I was out of town. I wasn't even here. And they're like, yeah, we know, but you're hiding something. You need to tell us what you're hiding. So he's like, well, I do have a confession. I had an affair. About a year ago, I started an affair. It ended about 6 months ago because I ended it. Because she was having feelings for me. But, like I said, it did end about 6 months ago. And it shouldn't have anything to do with this. But you feel like I've been hiding something. That's what I'm hiding. Well, who you having your affair with? Candy Montgomery. What? Betty's best friend, Candy Montgomery? You and her were having an affair? Yeah, it lasted about 6 months. But like I said, she started having feelings for me, so we decided to end it. Besides, Betty and I started getting along better. We were starting to do pretty good. We were talking about maybe a third baby, blah, blah, blah. So we decided to end it. End the affair. Well, then, of course, now they've got to talk to Candy Montgomery. And at first, Candy Montgomery denies the affair. And they're like, look, we've already talked to Alan Gore. And he already said y'all were having an affair. We'd like to know who ended it. Well, I did, she says. Why did you end it? She said, it felt like it was time to end it. I ended it. He says that he ended it because you were having feelings. He said, nah, he's just a friend of mine. I wasn't having feelings for him. Well, they notice that she's got a nicely manicured hand, but she's got 2 broken nails and some cuts. And they noticed a little bit of blood on her tennis shoes she was wearing. She said something about a broken door. She tried to kick it, and can't get it fixed, and she cut herself. So they take pictures of her hands and her bruises on her shins and bruises on her feet and a little bit of blood on her shoe. They send her on her way. Well, investigators think she did it. They even come up with a scenario. So investigators keep investigating, and she can tell that they're getting close to figuring it out. So she hires an attorney. She tells the attorney, I did it. I killed Betty Gore. It was an accident, and I didn't mean to kill her. Matter of fact, it was self-defense. Here's the thing. Betty Gore was whacked with that axe 41 times. 28 of those were in the head, and most of those were in the face. So, trial set. Candy Montgomery goes to trial for the death of Betty Gore. Sounds reasonable. The judge is already biased against her. You can tell it from the get-go. He's pretty sure she did it. He's biased against her, but it's got to be a jury of her peers. So The case has to be presented, and a jury has to come up with a verdict. They found her not guilty. Her excuse was her version of the story. And remind you, of course, Betty Gore's dead, so we don't get Betty Gore's story. We don't get Betty Gore's story at all. She can't say anything to defend herself. Candy's story was that Betty Gore came at her with an axe, threatening her. You better leave my man alone. Okay. There was a struggle over the axe. Candy ended up getting the axe from Betty and hit her with it. The problem is she just kept hitting her. Like I said, she whacked her with that axe 41 times. 28 of those were in the head, and most of those were in the face. But they found her innocent. Now, here's where I want everybody to bear with me. This is why this case bothers me. Well, lots of things about this case bother me, but here's something I don't get. Y'all listen to this. Pay attention. Think about this. All right, now let's say on the off chance that she told the truth. Let's say that Betty came after her with an axe. Let's say Betty presented her, came out with an axe going, that's my man. Because according to Candy, the question was asked, Betty asked her, are you having an affair with Alan? Candy said, no, I'm not. She said, did you have an affair with Alan? Well, yeah, I did, but that ended months ago, and I'm so sorry this happened. I'm so sorry to cause you this pain. That was never our intention, was to hurt you. And that's when Betty said, well, you can't have him. And then she turned to get the swimsuit out of the utility room and saw the axe and got the axe instead and was standing there going, you can't have my man. According to Candy, there was a struggle for the axe. According to Candy, she was able to get the axe from Betty, and she whacked her with it. Now, here's let's go with that. Let's pretend that's what happened. Let's pretend that Betty came out with an axe. Let's pretend that Betty threatened her, said, you know, here's an axe, and I'm going to whack you with it, and you come near my husband again, I'm going to kill you. That's possible. That is highly possible. She was already depressed. She was already having some issues. Let's say Candy and her struggled. And let's say she got that axe from her. And in the heat of that moment, in those moments, a lot of times your body moves faster than your brain can work. Okay? People's had stuff like that happen to where their body is moving, but their brain isn't really thinking. Okay? Or like you're talking and you say something before your brain has a chance to catch it. Similar problem. I mean, not typically with an axe, but y'all get what I'm saying. So let's just say in that moment, let's just say that's how that happened. There was a struggle for the axe. She whacked her. One time, I can see it. 2 times, probably. 3 times, maybe. Not likely, but because at some point your brain goes, hey, I'm hitting somebody with this axe. I'm killing them. I need to put this axe down, and I need to call 911. I need to do something. But she didn't. She whacked her 41 times, 28 times in the head, most of those in the face, and got off scot-free. Got off scot-free. Now let me ask you something. And let me add, after she got off scot-free, she of course couldn't stay in Texas anymore, so her and Pat and her kids, they moved to Georgia. I don't remember where at in Georgia. Don't care. They got a divorce. She changed her name. And now, as I've most recently reported, works as a family counselor. How the hell do you murder somebody with a fucking axe and then go get a job as a family counselor? I am stumped on this one. I think the verdict is entirely wrong. I think she should be in prison still. I don't understand how it was an accident or how it was self-defense. It was an accident. I didn't mean to hit her that many times. What? Help me. Somebody help me with this. Somebody help me with this. I don't understand how you can do this 41 times to somebody, call it an accident, and walk out of there scot-free. So, that's the story of Candy Montgomery, Betty Gore, Alan Gore, and Pat Montgomery. Happened in Wiley, Texas on June 13th, Friday, June 13th, 1980. Hulu has a little mini-series about it called Candy. HBO has a little mini-series about it, a little bit more in depth. It covers more detail about the affair, and it covers more detail about the court proceedings. And it's on HBO, and I think it's called Love and Death. That's the two places I know you can stream it. I don't know anywhere else that's covering it. That's the two places. I've watched both. What I did is I kind of just took information from both, and I just kind of compiled it together. Story blows my mind. So this is kind of an idea of what kind of stories I'm talking about. Either an unsolved mystery where somebody was murdered and they never caught the killer, or somebody was found guilty and they're probably innocent, or they're probably guilty and they were found innocent. So that's the kind of stories I want to do. Kind of want people's opinion either on the verdict, the case itself, whether or not I should do this kind of stuff. What's going on? I want to know. So, if you like this, please hit the like button and consider subscribing, maybe sharing. If it wasn't quite your cup of tea, but you know somebody that might like it, you can share it with them or hit the like button anyway, because every time somebody hits a like button, it gets me out into the algorithm and it allows more people to find me. And maybe somebody that likes me will find me, and they might not normally. So that's a free way of helping me, you know? It doesn't cost you anything. Hit the like button. Subscribe. If you subscribe, make sure you hit the little notification bell so that you know when I'm doing a video. Other than that, just trying to want people's idea either on the case itself or whether y'all would be interested in those kind of stories. So thank you. And I love everybody, and y'all have a beautiful and blessed night.